Hello everyone, this is Jeremy Class and I'm Magic with Class. I'm trying to get this video out a little earlier because I know I've been posting very late and I'm sure all of you want to hear my thoughts on the newest spoilers before the next day and before the next day's spoilers start coming out. So hopefully I will be able to post this video very shortly before the day is over. So as you can see, my first spoiler, or the first card spoiled that I'm going to be talked about, is Violet, Soul of Steel. Again, not really sure who this character is, if this character is in the story or in the lore, or if it's a future character that they want to test. I'm also not sure what the plane is, maybe a future plane. So for one of anything, one red and one white for a total of 3 mana, you get a legendary creature, so it can't be your commander. It does not have partner, and it's a human warrior. Humans have excellent support. Warriors are getting more and more support as time moves on, so these are excellent creature types to have. It is a 2/2, but it does have trample. You might ask why a 2/2 would need trample, but once you read the ability, I think you will understand why, and I'm actually happy to see the trample on this card. I might have preferred vigilance, and I very rarely say that, but trample to get through damage is very good. Of course, haste would have also been nice, but you can't have everything. So when this guy attacks, you draw a card for each aura and each equipment attached to him. So that is an amazing ability in red and white. Usually these two colors struggle with card advantage, and specifically they struggle with drawing cards. As of late, they're trying to do more with red and white in terms of card drawing. They're trying to get red and white to draw in ways that feel true to the colors. And I think they succeeded here for the most part. So whenever this guy attacks, you draw a card for each aura and equipment attached to him. I kind of wish the ability would have said that you can draw a card for each aura and equipment on the battlefield. That way you could spread out your auras and equipments a little more. I will also say that I kind of don't like cards that specifically call out both auras and equipment. I feel like the distinction between enchantments and artifacts is already minimal at this point. I feel like the difference between an aura and an equipment is too close as it is. So I wish they would differentiate these two card types, these two card subtypes more by not lumping them together on the same card. However, I must admit this does make the card much more powerful, and it actually gives this card multiple angles to both deck build and to experiment with. This card is quite good. Its mana cost is just 3, so you can play this multiple times in a commander game, hopefully. However, I think that when you build this deck, for the most part, you're going to choose one card subtype or the other. I don't think you're going to see a lot of decks, especially more competitive commander decks, that mix the auras and equipments. You're going to see them focus on probably one or the other. Now, red-white has a number of commanders that focus on equipments, and even white has a lot of commanders that focus on auras, so I'm not sure which is the better route to go down. For comparison, as you can see here, and I'm on Mythic Spoiler, by the way. I decided to use Mythic Spoiler today, just to mix things up. I don't think I used it in previous videos. So right here, the Thesaurus gives you some cards that you might want to play in a deck featuring the featured card. So I don't think this card needs any introduction. SRAM is probably the best mono white commander, and definitely a suitable choice if you want to go the equipment or the aura route. It also works with vehicles if that becomes more of a thing, and I think they will be printing some more vehicles in the future, possibly the near future. Now, I think that SRAM is technically a better commander than Wylith because you don't need to have the auras or the equipment actually equipped on just one creature. It's whenever you cast the card that you get to draw. It's also not dependent. SRAM is also not dependent on attacking. And one could argue that you can play out your equipment first, then play Wylith, then equip him with everything, and then attack to draw. While with SRAM, if you already have the equipment on the battlefield and then he enters after, you won't get the draws. But I think SRAM comes down early enough at 2 mana that that would not be a sufficient issue. So if I was going to play in equipment deck or an aura deck or a mixed deck, I think my first choice would be SRAM, but maybe I want to run some colored equipment in red and white. There was a mythic equipment spoil that is decent and could fit into this deck. So I think it's up to the person whether they want to go the mono white route or whether they want to go into Boros colors. If you do want to run red, if you are a Boros player, you like the color combination, I can't fault you for going with Wylith Soul of Steel. I will say that I think Wylith Soul of Steel is better than Akiri Fearless Voyager. Akiri is very similar to Wylith Soul of Steel because they both focus on equipments and they both draw cards in a color combination not usually known for that. However, while Akiri is pretty much you need to be playing against multiple opponents to get the best out of Akiri, Wylith you can actually even play in a 1v1 fashion because it will draw cards equal to the number of equipment and auras on it, rather than how many players you're attacking with equipment on them. So I do think that Wylith is the superior commander over Akiri. They also mentioned Sir Gwyn. I guess whenever you're talking about equipment, you have to bring this legendary knight up. But while I think Sir Gwyn would do better in a deck that focuses on Night Tribal with a lighter equipment something, I think Wylith really wants you to go all in with either auras or equipment or a little bit of both. So overall, this is a strong commander. I wouldn't say it's overpowered. I don't think I'm going to make an equipment deck using this as the commander. I actually have a Boros equipment deck already using the two Boros partner commanders. However, I might be updating that deck and maybe I'll run him in the 99 in that deck, or maybe I'll alternate and make him the commander in such a deck. I'm not actually sure, but this card is decent, but it's not something that excites me too much. The next card is Amphin Mutineer for 3 of anything in 1 blue, so a total of 4 mana. You get a Salamander Pirate. That's interesting. Pirate is the most supported creature type, I believe, in this set. There are a ton of pirates in this set, and some of them are pretty decent, and we're even going to see a mythic rare pirate in just a few. So when this card enters the battlefield, you get to exile up to 1 target non-salamander creature. That creature's controller creates a 4/3 blue salamander warrior creature token. So first you can use this on your own creatures to turn a tiny little creature, maybe a 1/1 token, into a 4/3 blue salamander, who's also a warrior for those tribal interactions. You can also use this on an opponent's creature to get rid of a major threat and leave them with just the 4/3. So 4/3 is sizable. However, in comparison to a card like Ulamog or Kozilek, I would definitely prefer to face down a 4/3 rather than a gigantic Eldrazi. I actually don't like that blue gets this polymorphing type ability. I think this is pretty much just removal in blue, and I don't think blue should get this level of removal. Pondrify and Rapid Hybridization are also kind of removal cards that leave behind a 3/3 creature in their case. And I just think that's too efficient. Those cards cost 1 mana. This one at least costs 4, but it comes with a 3/3 body. And this card still has another ability on top of that. I just don't think blue needs creature removal as powerful as this. And it also has pirate synergies, and you can also use it on your own stuff. So there's a lot going on here. So it does have Encore, which we've talked about before. The Encore is 6 mana, 4 of anything, and 2 blue. So if you have 3 opponents, you're going to get 3 Amphibious Mutineers, and their abilities are all going to trigger. And for 6 mana, you will be able to get rid of 3 of your opponent's creatures while leaving them with just a 4/3. And when you use the ability, you can target the same player for the exiling part of his ability, even though you usually cannot target the same player for the attacks using Encore. So for 6 mana, that's actually really good. Exiling 3 different creatures in blue, that sounds like something that might be playable in specific mono blue decks that are looking for good removal options. I just don't think blue should get this. This is a decent card, though. It is a rare. Tell me what you think. Do you like all the Pondrify and Rapid Hybridization type effects in blue? Do you think they're overpowered? Do you think they're in flavor for the color? I know what my personal opinions are. Ooh. What was he? Let me refresh this real quick. Oh, here's the card. So this is a reprint. Immaculate Magistrate. It costs 3 of anything and 1 green, and it's an Elf Shaman. It's a 2/2. You just tap it, and you can put a +1/+ counter on target creature for each elf you control. So if you have 5 elves, including this one, and you tap it, you could put 5 +1/+1 counters on any creature. The creature you target does not need to be an elf, but you probably wouldn't play this outside of Elf Tribal, and it is a little slow. It comes down. Well, you're playing an elf deck probably, so it probably will not come down on turn 4. It probably will come down a little before that. But you have to wait an entire turn before you can use the tap ability. So, I don't know. I think at this point, elves have better support cards. Their lords that just give +1/+1 as a static ability, I think are a little better than this card. And their mana-wise, they are usually cheaper. Some cost 2, some cost 3. However, if you were to play this in a elf-centered commander deck, I wouldn't be shocked. In fact, if that elf deck also has a +1/+1 counter theme or a token theme, as some of the other elf cards in this set seem to have, this card might get better and better. It is a reprint though. Oh, and I will say it is a rare. I don't like when they make reprints that are rare that are like low value. This card isn't expensive, and with this reprint, it's going to go even lower in value. So I kind of hate that they waste a rare slot on a card that's not financially viable. It's feel bad when you open this. However, I guess if you really like elves, you don't really care of the price of the card. So the next card is Court of Cunning for 1 of anything and 2 blue for a total of 3. You get an enchantment. As soon as this card enters, you become the monarch, which is pretty good. As long as you can keep that monarchy, you can draw every turn, which is very decent. At the beginning of your upkeep, any number of target players each mill 2 cards. So first of all, I like that it says each player. Mill decks sometimes struggle in a format like Commander because you're trying to mill more cards. A commander deck has 99 cards, but also you might have 3 opponents. So you're trying to mill 99 cards 3 times, which can become difficult. So I like these mill cards that specify each player instead of target player. The ability, though, if you are the Monarch, is insane. So if you're the Monarch, each of those players mills 10 cards instead. So that's a lot. 10 cards is in a commander deck over 1/10 of the total deck. So you really only need to have this card on the battlefield for 9 turns before you can mill out anything. However, you do have to stay the Monarch. If you lose the Monarch token, if your opponent takes the Monarch token from you, you'll only be milling 2 cards a turn, which is still decent. I feel like this card, if it was modern legal, would definitely see play. Lately, Mill has gotten a ton of support. There was the new Crab in Zendikar Rising, and there was a bunch of other really powerful Mill cards in Zendikar Rising, and also there was one in Throne of Eldraine. I see mono blue Mill decks on Magic the Gathering Arena all the time. It's one of the most played decks, and I can't tell you how many times I've been beaten by those 0/3 crabs. And in Modern, you actually get to play 8 crabs with an astonishingly similar effect. So Mill is very viable at the moment in both Standard and Modern, in my opinion. There's also Dimir Rogues, which kind of has like a Mill sub-theme. Some versions of the deck go harder into that Mill theme. Some go harder into the aggro part of the Rogue deck. I don't know which one is stronger, but I do see these 3 variations of decks all that's constantly on Magic the Gathering Arena. Overall, I like this card though. I would not be surprised if this card is $10 and stays $10 and even goes up. I don't think this card is going to be particularly cheap. I don't even really play Mill, but even I want a copy. I will say though that this cannot be used to mill yourself. So some cards actually that you can target yourself, and there's a lot of decks that run on self-mill. This is purely for milling out your opponents. So the next card is Prava of the Steel Legion. It costs 3 mana in total, 2 of anything and 1 white for a legendary creature, Cat Soldier. Now this Leonin looks like he's from Theros, and he has a fairly interesting ability. So as long as it's your turn, creature tokens you control get +1/+4. Now that is a huge toughness boost, especially on a 3 mana creature. However, the boost only happens during your turn, so you should be attacking with the tokens you create. And this card itself can create a token, so just in case your opponent destroys all your tokens or you're not able to find a token generation card, this can also provide the tokens for you at a larger cost than normal. For 4 mana, 3 of anything, and 1 white, you can create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Of course, as soon as you create that token, since if this card stays on the field, it will be a 2/5 if it's your turn. There's actually a commander, a Bant colored commander, spoiled today that we're going to go over that I think could use this card in that deck if you were to go a specific route with that card, and I'm going to talk more about that later. It especially works well if the tokens have evasion or vigilance as well. Or maybe if you're running some sort of high toughness theme where the card kinda deals damage equal to its toughness instead of its power. There's I think 1 card in white that might do that. Usually those decks don't run tokens though. The next card is Kamahl's Will. I've been talking about Kamahl a bit. He was a legendary creature that actually got two different legendary creature cards, one in red and one in green. He actually has a third legendary creature card in this set that we're going to talk about in just a few moments. But we're going to talk about the instant associated with him first. And I should say there's a legendary sorcery in Dominaria that also has Kamahl's name in it and kind of works in decks that want to do what Kamahl wants to do, at least the green one. So this is an instant, which is not that usual in green. Green rarely gets sorceries and instants at all. Out of all the colors, I think it gets sorceries and instants the least. Also, it doesn't get instants much at all. So this is part of that cycle where if you control your a commander, you get both effects out of the spell. If you don't control a commander, you have to pick one. So the first ability is, until end of turn, any number of target lands become 1/1 elemental creatures with vigilance, indestructible, and haste, but they're still lands. And the second ability, choose target creature you don't control. Each creature you control deals damage equal to its power to that creature. So the idea is, if you control your mana, if you control your commander, you can turn a whole bunch of your lands into indestructible creatures and then use those lands, which are now creatures, to deal a whole bunch of damage to another target creature you don't control as part of a fight effect. So this is actually removal in green, which is okay because this removal requires having creatures, and usually it requires having a bunch of creatures. However, the card itself provides the creatures that you can use to remove your opponent's creatures, so it's kind of close, in my opinion, to be doing to being a color pie break. I don't know if one card should be providing both the creatures necessary to destroy your opponent's creatures and have the fight ability attached. I'm sure that this is something that the Color Council talked about in depth. And I think on Blogatalk I might ask about this card because it's definitely a little questionable. So this can be used either offensively or defensively. It's an instant, so you can turn a bunch of your lands into creatures and then block with them. Since they're indestructible, they won't be destroyed as long as your opponent doesn't have trample. The damage won't go through. But the creatures also have, the land creatures that you create also have vigilance and haste, so you can also use this offensively, create a whole bunch of land creatures, kill your opponent's biggest thing or something that you can take down, and then attack with everyone. And since the lands have vigilance, these land creatures have vigilance, after doing all that, you can cast another spell if you have the mana. Overall, this is pretty good. You're going to see when we go over Kamahl that this fits very well into that type of deck. And here he is, Kamahl, Heart of Krosa. This is the third version of Kamahl. One of them is a fairly popular commander that can turn lands into creatures. However, that old version of Kamahl could turn your opponent's lands into creatures, and I saw a lot of people abusing that part of the ability to turn your opponent's lands into creatures and then destroying them, maybe with mass removal. So this card costs 8 mana, which is very expensive. It costs 6 of anything and 2 green for legendary creature Human Druid. At the beginning of combat on your turn, and I like what the cards say at the beginning of combat, because that means you're going to get the ability almost as soon as you cast this guy. You don't have to wait till your upkeep or anything, or the next turn, or the next cycle of turns. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, only on your turn, creatures you control get +3 and +3, and they gain trample. So basically, he's an overrun. Overrun costs 5 mana, and I think anything less would be just too overpowered. So the fact that this guy does this every turn, and including the turn you play him, means that he is pretty good already. You're already getting 5 mana at least out of that first ability alone. You're also getting a 5/5 for the deal because he is 5/5. But since this ability works with him, as soon as you attack with him, he doesn't have haste though, so you're going to have to wait to attack with him until next turn. He actually becomes an 8/8 trample. So every turn you're going to have an 8/8 trample for 8. That's okay. But then he has another ability for 1 of any color and 1 green, so 2 mana. Until end of turn, target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste, and it's still a land. So this card only allows you to turn your own cards, your own lands, into creatures, but they have vigilance, indestructible, and haste. So these cards are both good to block, and they are also pretty good to attack. This card does have partner as well. I guess what some people are going to do flavor-wise is pair Kamahl with his sister Jessica. Jessica is mono red and this guy is green, so a big smashy rule deck could be interesting using these 2 cards. And as you can see, the last ability, animating lands, is kind of a Kamahl thing. That's why the card associated with him also animates lands. It's something even his older legendary creature card, as I said, did. The red version of him, though, just does damage. It doesn't have anything to do with creatures or lands. Overall, I can see a commander deck using this. It'll probably be like a big stopping roll deck, though. Next card is Port Raiser for 5 mana, 3 of any color, and 2 red. You get an Orc Pirate. I like Orcs, I'm just going to say that right off the bat. I'm a big fan of Orcs, and I wish they would make Orcs more often, and I wish they would give Orcs some tribal support. Orcs are a very popular fantasy staple. They were in Lord of the Rings, so I don't know why Magic the Gathering does not use Orcs more. Maybe in the Dungeons and Dragons set we're going to see a couple more Orcs, but the fact that it's an Orc really doesn't matter. The pirate part of the creature type could matter. You could very well play this in a pirate commander deck. I think any pirate commander deck, as long as it was partially red, should play this card. But it can definitely see play outside of the pirate deck. When this card deals combat damage to a player, you untap each creature you control, and after that combat, there's an additional combat phase. Port Raiser, however, cannot attack a player. It has already attacked this turn. So if you're playing against 3 opponents, you attack with Port Raiser. It deals combat damage to that player. Blue pirates have a whole bunch of ways to get in for damage. So maybe pairing blue and red together and then running this guy. It's not legendary, so you cannot use this as your commander. But a blue-red pirate deck, or even a pirate deck run by Admiral Beckett Brass, would love to include this guy. He's actually very strong. So if you have 3 opponents and he deals damage to 1, you untap all your creatures. Now, Port Raiser can't attack the player you just damaged, but he can attack the second player. However, any other creatures you may have are free to attack that first player. So you attack that second player, you deal combat damage again, you untap everything again, all your creatures again. Your creatures attack, Port Raiser must attack the third player, but all your creatures are still free to attack, all your other creatures are still free to attack that first player. So that's very versatile. There's a ton of ways to take extra combat steps. Taking extra combat in red can sometimes feel like taking an extra turn. So I definitely think that this card is pretty strong. I'm just a little sad you can't use it as a commander because I think it would make an awesome commander. However, in Zendikar Rising, they did have a commander focused on taking extra turns in the form of landfall. I forgot what his name is, but he's that Minotaur with the giant horns. In that deck, I would definitely play Port Raiser in the 99 as well. So I think there's a couple of homes for a card like this. And it's kind of easy to go infinite with this card as well, I guess. It's not that hard to be able to have an infinite number of combat phases. Actually, no, it would be. Would it be? Let me think. Maybe. Well, how many combat phases do you really need to finish off an opponent? I'm going to be looking for combos and synergies with Port Razor in the future. These are just my initial thoughts. I haven't really looked what cards would go well in decks surrounding these cards. I mean, you can look right here. Sometimes it gives you some options. Alright, so the next card is Horizon Stone for 5 mana. And the name Horizon Stone is just a placeholder. They don't know what the official name for this card is going to be yet. So basically, if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. So basically, you can take if you would end the turn while having like untapped sources of lands or mana rocks, you can tap them as long as Horizon Stone is on the battlefield, and you will continue to take that extra mana into your next phase, into your opponent's turn, into your next turn. It basically stores your mana. I see right here they're mentioning Krufix and Omnith, which have very similar effects. I don't know what deck would best suit this card. 5 mana is pretty expensive just to bank extra mana. If this costs 2 or 3, I think it would be significantly better. I think maybe as a redundancy to Krufix and Omnith in those types of decks. Maybe. Oh, next card is Omrith the Lustrous for 3 of any color, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue, so 6 mana in total. You get a legendary creature dragon, that's a 6/6 flyer. Now the first thing I thought when I saw this card was, this is a non-red dragon, which is kind of unusual in itself, especially because I don't think this card is part of a cycle. Also, I do not know who this is. I'm not sure if this is a character in the story or the lore that I'm just not aware of. But as far as I know, this is not a legendary creature that we know a significant amount about. Maybe these are like hints for some things that they're going to do in the future. Maybe this hints at a cycle of 3-color dragons in the Dungeons and Dragons set. So the second thing I thought of when I saw this card was, wow, it's not that good. This is kind of like the Kodama card we saw yesterday. Well, let me read its effect first. So it's a 6/6 flyer. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it shares a card type with that permanent, you may reveal that card and put it into your hand. So the first thing that I thought was, what? This effect is just not that strong. I thought that if it shares a card type with that permanent, you should be able to put it directly onto the battlefield. Kodama costs 6 mana as well, and when you cast a permanent, or play a permanent if it's a land, you can take a permanent in your hand that has the same or less mana cost and just put it directly onto the battlefield. And it's not random. You know what's in your hand. So you know if you play a 5 mana card with that Kodama card out, and you have a 4 mana card in your hand, that you can also slam down the 4 mana card. This one is more up to chance, because usually you don't know what the top card of your library is. So then I thought, what would I do if I had to use this card as a commander? So I thought, okay, there are cards with multiple card types. There are artifact creatures and there are enchantment creatures. And then when I thought of enchantment creatures, I thought, okay, so this is in green, white, and blue, and those are kind of good colors for an enchantment type deck. So maybe a enchantress style deck that uses a lot of the enchantment creatures from the Theros sets and just a lot of cheap enchantments, or maybe even some more expensive ones, would make for an interesting deck. You can also use artifact creatures and then have your deck full of artifacts and creatures. Now, the one thing that I also thought of is this counts lands as well, just like Kodama did. So if I play a land and there's a land on the top of my deck, I can also play that land. No, I'm sorry, I can put that land into my hand with Amaranth. So that's decent. This card can kind of smooth out your draws and smooth out your land drops, I suppose. But let's say I cast a sorcery that creates, 5 tokens. Since 5 creatures enter the battlefield, I would trigger this card 5 times. Look at the top 5 cards of my deck, and for each creature among them, I would put it into my hand. So this card can also be a draw engine, but most cards that make multiple tokens are not permanents. They're sorceries or they're instants. However, there are a few creatures that can produce multiple tokens. So maybe I can run those cards in a deck like this. The more I think about this card, the more open-ended I think this card actually is. And the more interested I am in trying to make a deck that's going to use this as a commander. And I'm not sure what route I'm going down. I'm definitely going to try an enchantment-based deck. There's already a decent Bant enchantment commander, but I may use a couple of the cards I have in that deck and include it in this Amaranth deck. I don't think I'm going to go the artifact creature route. I don't think I'm going to do that. I may go a token route, though, where I play a whole bunch of permanents that also produce tokens, and then have the deck be very, very creature heavy. But I'll also use some sorceries and instants that put a whole bunch of creature tokens onto the battlefield as well, so I can trigger his ability like the maximum number of times. Putting 7 tokens on the battlefield would trigger him 7 times and potentially allow me to draw 7 cards if all the cards are creatures. So, the more I think about this card, the more I actually like it. If you have a deck that you think would work really well with this as the commander, let me know in the comments. Okay, the next card is Zara, Wind Raider. For 5 mana, 3 of anything, 1 blue and 1 red. She's a human pirate, a legendary creature human pirate. She's a 4/3 and she has flying, so another pirate card and another pirate in the blue-red combination. I don't think there are any black pirates in this set. At least they're not focused on. So when this card attacks, you look at your opponent's hand. That's always good to get some information. And then you may put a creature card from among those cards onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking that same player. So that's really good. So if your opponent has something huge like an Eldrazi in their hand and you attack with this character, you can basically take that Eldrazi out of their hand and swing with it. I'm trying to see what set it's from. It doesn't really look like it's from Ixalan, but I could be wrong. Maybe this hints that there are pirates on other worlds, that pirate tribal and pirating is popular amongst many worlds. So maybe one day we will see a different plane that has a pirate focus. I don't like that you have to return that creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So you basically only get to steal the card for the battle phase. Sometimes if you're stealing something like an Eldrazi, especially if it has Annihilator, that can sometimes be enough. The casting cost seems fair. If you blink the card, however, Like, let's say you have Thassa Deep Dwelling and you steal your opponent's creature with Zara, and then you use Thassa to blink it, you get to keep the card permanently, I believe. I could be wrong though, but I think that is the case. She is legendary. You could run her as a commander, maybe as a commander for your pirates. In Commander Legends Limited, that would certainly be a possibility, but there are just better overall commanders for pirates. Still a decent card though. The next card is your Lock of the Burn Thrash. It's a Viashino. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, Viashino? I think so. So this card is a legendary creature in Jund colors. Viashino Shaman. Legendary. For one of anything, one black, one red, and one green, you get a 4/4 vigilance. So decent rate right off the bat. If a player loses unspent mana, they lose that amount of life. So basically, as long as this card is on the battlefield, you play like the rules used to be with mana burn. A lot of people don't remember what mana burn is or didn't play when mana burn was a thing. The reason that they removed mana burn from the game was because it just wasn't coming up enough for it to be relevant. Like, you don't want to teach a new player a rule that's going to come up maybe once in every 100 games. So it just wasn't worth the explanation to continue to have that rule as part of the game. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that they should never have removed mana burn, but I don't think many people got upset when it was removed. This, however, basically brings that rule back as long as it's on the battlefield. So it has another ability. For just one mana and a tap, you add BRG to your mana pool. You add one black, one red, and one green mana to your mana pool. First thing I thought of when I saw this is any card that can produce multiple amounts of mana as a tap ability is just begging for like infinite combos that untap it and then tap it again. However, this says each player gains BRG, so your opponent is also getting the same amount of mana as you. But if you use this during your turn, it will be very difficult for your opponent to use this mana unless they have an instant or a card with flash in their hand. If you do use an infinite combo to continuously untap and then tap this card, you will win the game because your opponent will die to the mana burn that this card produces. However, if they have like an instant X spell in their hand, you could be in a lot of trouble because they can use that mana to potentially kill you, especially if they have like an X burn spell at instant speed. You can also use this, I guess, politically to ramp your opponents if they promise to use spells to target your other opponents, I guess. So that's kind of an interesting dimension. And you can use this during your opponent's turn as well. So this card is very interesting. I want to see if most people play it in the sense where they're using just a whole bunch of cards that will untap this guy, and then you tap it, and then it generates mana, and you use that mana to untap it, and then you tap it again. I think that's the way that this card is going to be competitively used. Jin doesn't have a commander like that as far as I know, so I'm kind of interested to see this color combination go in a different direction. Most Jin decks are like maybe sacrifice decks or big smashy decks. They're like roll decks but with black, so there's some better removal, I guess. Or I've seen Shatter Game Brothers, which is again like a sacrifice type deck. This one is interesting. I wonder what people are going to do to brew this. Okay. Next card, and I probably should have talked about this guy when I talked about the mono blue salamander, just because thematically they both have to do with salamanders and they both produce the same creature token. So this card is Simic. It's green and blue. It costs 3 mana in total, one of anything, one green, and 1 blue. And for that 3 mana, you get a 3/2, which is okay. It's a human scout. Human is good. Scout, I don't think has any support cards. So UN permanents you control have protection from salamanders. So obviously this does work against any tribal salamander decks that might exist. There are none, to the best of my knowledge. However, maybe that blue salamander revealed in this set pushes that deck, which only has like 3 or 4 salamander members, into a competitive direction. I'm just kidding. The protection from salamanders ties into his next ability. So at the beginning of your end step, and I like that as well. I hate cards that say at the beginning of your upkeep, because you just have to wait so long to get the ability. Sometimes it doesn't feel worth it. If the ability happens during your turn, it feels like even if this card is killed or destroyed, you still got something out of your mana. So at the beginning of your end step, each player who controls the fewest creatures creates a 4/3 blue salamander warrior creature token. So the idea actually probably isn't to get salamanders yourself. You're in blue-green, so you probably should be playing a bunch of creatures. It's basically to give your opponent a salamander, knowing that the salamander you give them can't really hurt you as long as this stays on the battlefield. And it incentivizes your opponent who has these salamanders to attack other opponents who don't have the protection from salamanders. And on Blogatalk, they did tease this card with protection from salamanders. It's an interesting design. It's kind of weird. I don't think blue salamander tokens have been in any other set. And the 4/3 kind of looks strange. Usually tokens have square stats, meaning their power and their toughness are the same. And it's kind of weird that for a blue token, the power is higher than the toughness. I would think the salamander would be like a 3/4 instead of a 4/3. But this card is legendary. It does not have partner. I don't know. I think if you're going to make a commander deck out of using this guy, it's mostly going to be for fun. I'm not sure if this is competitive. But if you do, for some reason, control the fewest amount of creatures or tied for the fewest, you can also generate 4/3 salamander tokens as well. So that's pretty good. I should also note that, let's say there are 4 players and each one controls just one creature. You're all tied for the fewest creatures, so you would all get the blue salamander token. Okay, this is a reprint. It's run away together for 1 of anything and 1 blue. It's an instant. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. So you can choose yourself and your opponent, or you can choose 2 different opponents, and you can return those creatures to their owner's hands. So maybe you want to save your creature that's being targeted with a spell or a mass, whether it's mass removal or something. You can use this to save one of your creatures, send a teammate's creature back to their hand, or return one of your opponent's creatures and return one of your creatures that has an ETB effect back to your hand. I just like the art. I just like the art on this card, though. This was from Throne of Eldraine originally. Okay, so they reprinted. This is a reprint as well. Finderhorn Elves, which for just 1 green, you get an Elf Druid with tap add G, and it's a 1/1. I don't know why they reprinted Finderhorn Elves instead of Lorna Elves or Elvish Mystic. I guess maybe people don't really have Finderhorn Elves or don't know about this card. It's not as famous as Lorna Elves, and Elvish Mystic was at least in more recent sets. So I guess this can expose newer players to yet another 1-drop mana elf. It's a reprint though, nothing else to say about it. Another elf. So in this set, it seems like elves have a lot of support as well. Looks like pirates have a little bit more. But then again, overall, elves throughout the history of the game have much, much, much more support than Pirates. Pirates only started receiving tribal support during Ixalan, and it took them just too long to realize that pirates and dinosaurs were going to be two popular tribes. Also, are there really no dinosaurs in this set at all? They gotta give us a legendary dinosaur, just a cool dinosaur in general. So Far-Haven Health is a card that I play all the time in Commander. For 3 mana, 2 of anything, 1 green, it's an Elf Druid, a 1/1. So when it enters, you search the library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle your library. So in decks where I want to maximize my creature count, for whatever reason, I don't want to use cards like Cultivate or Kodama's Reach, or I don't want to use cards like Rampant Growth because I don't want to run sorceries and instants, for example, because I have a commander that cares about permanence, and we saw 2 such commanders over the last 2 or 3 days. But you still want to ramp, you can run something like Far-Haven Elves. Wood Elves is another example, and there are more. Reprint though. So the next card is Makeshift Munitions. For 1 of anything and 1 red, you get an enchantment. For 1 mana, you can sacrifice an artifact or creature, and this card will deal 1 damage to any target, and you can use that ability as many times as you like, as many times as you have the mana and the resources to sacrifice. That's not bad, but what makes these types of cards good is that the sacrifice ability would be free, because many combos place an infinite amount of tokens on the battlefield, and if this was a free sacrifice outlet, you could sacrifice whatever 100 tokens and do 100 damage to your opponent. I don't think you're going to have 100 mana to sacrifice your 100 creatures, so this isn't quite as good as cards like Goblin Bombardment, but it's decent. The one thing I did want to talk about with this card is when I first saw the art, I knew right away that this was set on Ixalan, and there's a boat, they're just like pirates. Only in Ixalan, I believe, do they have like cannon type weapons like you're seeing in the art. So the first time I looked at this art, I'm like, okay, it's makeshift munitions, makeshift cannonballs, basically, or makeshift like weapons. I was like, okay, so they're taking statues and damaged statues, they're using it as makeshift weapons. They'll use anything, basically. They're pirates. But then I remembered, or I thought, well, what was Vraska? Vraska was a pirate on Ixalan. And what was her main power? What are Gorgons most known for? They're known for turning people or things that they don't like into stone with their gaze. So it seems like Vraska turned a whole bunch of people into stone, and they're cracking off the heads of the people that Vraska's turning into stone, and then using that as munitions. So that's pretty dark. That's interesting. I do like the flavor. It's unique. It's something that you have to think about to really get. Just someone looking at this card once wouldn't think, okay, that's a human that's been turned to stone. They'll just think it's a statue, and they never explicitly state that that's a human that Vraska has turned to stone. But the implication is certainly there. So I think this is my favorite art and favorite name from the set so far. So I think I went over all of the cards that were spoiled today. I'm just going to quickly show all the cards that have been spoiled already, and I think I've talked about so far all of them. Once again, I'm on Mythic Spoiler. I decided to use Mythic Spoiler today to show off some of these cards. I may not use it in the future, I may use it again. I usually look at multiple websites to make sure that the cards, the text and the cards are accurate. There were a lot of foreign spoilers today as well, but I believe that the translations and everything are accurate. Oh, and Magus of the Order. The card I was thinking about that this card is clearly referencing is Natural Order. I forgot that yesterday. Oh, actually, there is one more card that, at least one more card that I did not talk about. Well, 2 cards actually. We'll do this one first because it's a reprint. Imperious Perfect. This card has been printed at rare before. I'm glad to see it as an uncommon here. So for 2 of anything and 1 green for a total of 3, you get an Elf Warrior. Elf and Warrior both very well supported creature types at this point. Elf more than Warrior though. So this is a Lord, like I was saying before. Elves have plenty of Lords. Other Elves you control get +1/+1. This card also has another ability because the Elves in this set seem to have a token type theme. For 1 green and a tap, you can create a 1/1 green Elf creature token. I especially like this Lord for Elves because it can create its own army that get boosted by her static ability. So, I've won games pretty much single-handedly with Imperious Perfect because me and my opponent were going back and forth. We were trading cards, trading resources, and then I managed to stick an Imperious Perfect. And then I just kept creating tokens every turn. And eventually my opponent got overwhelmed because the tokens were 2/2s. And then I think I played another Imperious Perfect, and all of a sudden I'm making 2 tokens a turn and 2 tokens a turn, and now they're 3/3s. And if you play another Elf Lord on top of that, you're going to get a whole bunch of creatures with rather high power and toughness for Elves. Usually Elves are not known for being individually so strong, but they are known for swarming and mostly known for generating mana. This is one of the few Elves that actually does not generate any mana, but that's okay. All the other Elves do that. So, last card I believe is Numa, Draga Chieftain. This is a legendary creature. It has partner as well, and it's also an Elf Warrior. So for 3 mana, again, 2 of anything and 1 green, you get an Elf Warrior. This one can be used as your commander, and you can also partner it with another legendary creature or another legendary planeswalker with partner. So at the beginning of combat, and again, I like how this set knows that if you want to make playable commander cards, the abilities have to trigger almost immediately for the card to have like any impact. If you leave this card on the battlefield and it can't, or any card on the battlefield and it can't activate its effect that turn, it's usually not going to give you any value. Usually one of your opponents is going to take care of it if it's a sufficient threat. This is a commander though, so you can always recast it with the commander tax. And it has a partner, whichever partner you choose, that can help support it. Is there another partner? Is there another elf legendary creature that you can partner with this? Because this appears to have an elf treble effect. So at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay XX. I don't know if that's just 1x or if it's 2x, because there are cards with a cost of double X. But when you do, you distribute X+1/+1 counters among any number of target elves you control. So again, this is asking you for a go-wide theme using elves, maybe using elf tokens. You can distribute counters among them. And if this is just pay a single X, this would be pretty powerful. If you pay 6 and its cost is only a single X, you can distribute 6+1/+1 counters among all of your elves. So if you have 6 elves, you can give them each a +1/+1 counter. If you have 3 elves, you can give them each 2 counters. If you have 5 elves, you can give 1 3 counters, another 1 2 counters, and the rest 0 counters. You can distribute it however you like. If it's double X, which I kind of think it is because a single X for this ability seems too strong, but if it's double X, then it's not great because for 4 mana, you can only distribute 2 counters to target elves, and it's asking you to commit a lot of mana. We have to see if there's a decent legendary partner elf. I'm sure if elves have another legendary creature with partner, it will probably be black, since in Commander Legends it seems like the elf strategy is green-black token elves with +1/+1 counters to support the huge number of tokens that you could be making. Not bad though. Of course, I think there are just better elves better function as lords, and they're just better elf commanders. There's a lot of mono green elf commanders, and there's even a few decent black green elf commanders. So I believe we went over these cards. I don't know if did I talk about this yesterday? Meteoric Maze. Just in case I didn't, let me just briefly go over this again. So it has Cascade. So for 6 mana, you automatically get the Cascade ability. I think this is the first artifact equipment that actually has Cascade. So right off the bat, that's kind of interesting. I would not play this in an equipment deck, however. I don't think it's good enough for that. I think the only place that this will see play is the Cascade type of deck. +4, +0 is and trample is what I would expect from a red equipment. And the equip cost of 4 for that type of boost seems fair. The initial cost of 6 mana just to get this out seems high, but then again, all the Cascade cards are costed a little higher because of the ability, just because of the strength of the Cascade mechanic. Although the randomness kind of kills it. However, a well-crafted Cascade deck will have ways to mitigate that randomness. And just imagine playing this on turn 6, cascading into a 5 mana Cascade card, cascading into a 4 mana, cascading into a 3, and then hitting a Soul Ring or some other mana accelerant. Seems like where you want to be in a Cascade deck. So, anything else? Okay, Supreme Well, this is a reprint. Valakut, I believe, is a reprint. I'm not sure if I talked about those, but they're strictly limited fodder. I don't even think. Well, Supreme Will might see some play in a counter-heavy deck because of its alternate option. Talked about Fenderhorn Elves. Yep. Once again, here are some of the etched foil cards that will be appearing with some degree of certainty in the collector boosters. I believe there's maybe one. There's at least one in every collector booster, but I think there's a chance you might get more than one. Now, I just don't like the rates of the collector boosters. They're just ultra confusing. Like, some of them are like, yeah, you can get a rare or a mythic, but sometimes there's a 30% chance that you'll get something else, and it's just very confusing and very hard to understand. I might be doing a video in the future that talks about the probabilities of getting specific cards in Commander Legends, collector boosters, or just collector boosters in general. I don't know why they make it so confusing, but it's really hard to keep track of. Even I am like, okay, like they couldn't simplify this. So, yep, it looks like I am done for the day, and in just about an hour. So those are all the spoilers for Commander Legends that have appeared today. I'm going to be posting this video before 10 p.m. So please give it a listen, give it a like. If you do like what you are hearing, feel free to leave me a message or subscribe. So, I'm Jeremy Class. This is Magic with Class, and I'm always reminding you to gather with Class. Have a great night and stay tuned for future videos on Commander Legends spoilers tomorrow.